日本語 listeners の皆さん、おはようございます。私の名前はアミン・パーカーです。残念ながら、このビデオは完全に英語になります。Theme は関ヶ原の戦いとして知られる有名な日本の戦争についてです。英語のビデオが好きならこのビデオを聞いてください。それはその戦争中に何が起こったかを非常に正確に描写しています。では、recording を聞いてみましょう。
The Battle of Sekigahara was a decisive battle on October 21, 1600, Kaicho 5, 15th day of the 9th month, in what is now Gifu Prefecture, Japan, at the end of the Sengoku period. This battle was fought by the forces of Tokugawa Ieyasu against a coalition of Toyotomi loyalist clans under Ishida Mitsunari, several of which defected before or during the battle, leading to a Tokugawa victory. The Battle of Sekigahara was the largest battle of Japanese feudal history and is often regarded as the most important. Toyotomi's defeat led to the establishment of the Tokugawa shogunate. Tokugawa Ieyasu took 3 more years to consolidate his position of power over the Toyotomi clan and the various daimyo. But the Battle of Sekigahara is widely considered to be the unofficial beginning of the Tokugawa shogunate, which ruled Japan for another 2.5 centuries until 1868. Toyotomi Hideyoshi was a prominent general under Oda Nobunaga. Nobunaga unified much of Japan under his rule after defeating the shogun Ashikaga Yoshiaki and ending the Ashikaga shogunate. However, he was betrayed by Akechi Mitsuhide and died at the Hano-ji incident of 1582. Hideyoshi quickly avenged his master and consolidated control over Japan afterward, with the aid of his brother Hidenaga. Hideyoshi had risen from humble roots, his father having been an ashigaru, foot soldier, to become the ruler of Japan. To bolster his claim, Hideyoshi married noble women so that his heirs at least would descend from suitably distinguished families. The final years of Hideyoshi's reign were troubled. While rivals in the Hojo clan were defeated at the siege of Odawara in 1590, failures in the invasions of Korea significantly weakened the Toyotomi clan's power and its support from bureaucrats who served in the government. Additionally, Hideyoshi ordered the execution of Toyotomi Hidetsugu and his entire family in 1595. Hidetsugu was his nephew and heir, as well as the regent at the time who had been expected to take up leadership after Hideyoshi. When Hideyoshi was on his deathbed in 1598, he set up a regency government as his new heir. Toyotomi Hideyori was only 5 years old. Hideyoshi's death created a power vacuum. There was no appointed shogun over the armies. The respected regent Maeda Toshi, a neutral party between the clashing factions, kept the peace for a time, but he too died in 1599. Two main factions arose during the fading years of Hideyoshi's rule and the immediate aftermath of his death. Tokugawa Ieyasu was unrivaled in terms of seniority, rank, reputation and overall influence within the regency government, and had the allegiance of many of the lords of eastern Japan. Toyotomi clan loyalists and the lords of western Japan rallied behind Ishida Mitsunari. Tensions between them sometimes boiled into open hostilities, with relations eventually degenerating into the conflicts of 1600 that led to the Battle of Sekigahara. Kato Kiyomasa and Fukushima Masanori were publicly critical of the bureaucrats, especially Mitsunari and Konishi Yukinaga. Tokugawa Ieyasu took advantage of this situation and recruited them, redirecting the animosity to weaken the Toyotomi clan. 9. Rumors started to spread stating that Ieyasu, at that point the only surviving contemporary ally of Oda Nobunaga, would take over Hideyoshi's legacy just as Nobunaga's was taken. This was especially evident amongst the loyalist bureaucrats, who suspected Ieyasu of agitating unrest amongst Toyotomi's former vassals. Later, a supposed conspiracy to assassinate Ieyasu surfaced, and many Toyotomi loyalists, including Maeda Toshi's son, Toshinaga, were accused of taking part and forced to submit to Ieyasu's authority. 9. Uesugi Kagekatsu, one of Hideyoshi's appointed regents, defied Ieyasu by building up his military. When Ieyasu officially condemned him and demanded that he come to Kyoto to explain himself, Kagekatsu's chief advisor, Naoi Kanetsugu, responded with a counter-condemnation that mocked Ieyasu's abuses and violations of Hideyoshi's rules. Ieyasu was infuriated. 10. Afterwards, Ieyasu summoned the help of various supporters and led them northward to attack the Uesugi clan. However, many of them were at that moment besieging Hosedo. Ishida Mitsunari, grasping the opportunity created by the chaos, rose up in response and created an alliance to challenge Ieyasu's supporters. Ishida, in his home Sawayama Castle, met with Otani Yoshitsugu, Mashida Nagamori and Ankokuji Ike. Here, they forged their alliance, and invited Mori Terumoto to be its head. They formed what came to be referred to as the Western Army. Mori seized Osaka Castle for their base of operations, since most of Tokugawa's forces had vacated the area to attack Uesugi. Ishida wanted to reinforce Mori at the impregnable Osaka Castle. This would let Ishida control the capital of Kyoto and challenge the Tokugawa. To this end, Ishida's forces headed for Gifu Castle in order to use it as a staging area to move on Kyoto, since it was controlled by his ally Oda Hidenobu. Back in Edo, Tokugawa Ieyasu received news of the situation in the Kansai region and decided to deploy his forces. Ieyasu himself commanded 30,000 men and his subordinates led another 40,000 men. This made up the bulk of what would later be called the Eastern Army. He had some former Toyotomi daimyo engage with the Western Army, while he split his troops and marched west on the Tokaido towards Osaka. Since the Tokugawa army departed from Edo, it could only take two roads, both of which converged on Gifu Castle. Ieyasu marched on Gifu while Ishida Mitsunari was delayed at Fushimi Castle. This fortress was a halfway point between Osaka and Kyoto and was controlled by the Tokugawa ally Torii Mototada. Ishida could not risk leaving a force that could attack his rear, so he marched on it. It took him 10 days to capture Fushimi, and in that time Gifu Castle had fallen. This forced Ishida Mitsunari to retreat southward in the rain. The rain was relevant in that the bulk of both armies were equipped with matchlock rifles, Tanegashima, which required dry gunpowder to fire. Ishida Mitsunari and his troops were stationed at Ogaki Castle by mid-October 1600. They were evaluating their situation when Tokugawa's army arrived 2 days later at Mino Akasaka, a few miles away from their location. Initially, the Eastern Army had 75,000 men, while the Western Army numbered 120,000. Ieyasu had also brought a supply of arquebuses. Knowing that the Tokugawa forces were heading towards Osaka, Ishida decided to abandon his positions and march to Sekigahara, even though the Western Army had tremendous tactical advantages. Ieyasu had already been in contact with many of the daimyo in the Western Army for months, promising them land and leniency after the battle should they switch sides. Shima Sakin, one of Mitsunari's commanders, requested permission to attack the nearest Tokugawa troops. Later, Sakin clashed with Honda Tadakatsu at the Battle of Kusagawa. As a result, the Eastern Army suffered significant losses from the battle and had to pull back from the Mino Akasaka territory to Sekigahara. Not wanting to lose the advantage, Mitsunari ordered his army to surround Ieyasu at Sekigahara. Ishida deployed his troops in a strong defensive position, flanked by two streams with high ground on the opposite banks. His right flank was reinforced by daimyo Kobayakawa Hideaki on Mount Matsuo. On October 20, 1600, Ieyasu learned that Ishida Mitsunari had deployed his troops at Sekigahara in a defensive position. They had been following the Western Army, and benefited from considerably better weather. At dawn on October 21, 1600, the Tokugawa advance guard stumbled into Ishida's army. Neither side saw each other because of the dense fog caused by the earlier rain. Both sides panicked and withdrew. But that resulted in both sides being aware of their adversary's presence. 14. Ishida held his defensive position while Ieyasu deployed his forces south of Ishida forces, sending his allies' forces in a line to the front and holding his own troops in reserve. Around 8 a.m., wind blew away the fog, and both sides noticed their respective adversaries' positions. Last-minute orders were issued and the battle began. The battle started when Fukushima Masanori, the leader of the Tokugawa advance guard, charged north from the Eastern Army's left flank along the Fuji River against the Western Army's right center under Yukita Hide. The ground was still muddy from the previous day's rain, so the conflict there devolved into something more primal. Ieyasu then ordered attacks from his right and center against the Western Army's left in order to support Fukushima's attack. 14. This left the Western Army's center unscathed. So Ishida ordered this unit under the command of Shimazu Yoshihiro to reinforce his right flank. Shimazu refused as daimyo of the day only listened to respected commanders, which Ishida was not. 14. Fukushima's attack was slowly gaining ground, but this came at the cost of exposing their flank to attack from across the Fuji River by Otani Yoshitsugu, who took advantage of this opportunity. Just past Otani's forces were those of Kobayakawa Hideaki on Mount Matsuo. 14. Kobayakawa Hideaki was one of the daimyo who had been courted by Tokugawa. Even though he had agreed to defect to the Tokugawa side, in the actual battle he was hesitant and remained neutral. Some theories mention that as the battle grew more intense, Ieyasu finally ordered his arquebuses to fire at Kobayakawa's position on Mount Matsuo to force a choice. However, the sheer distance between the Eastern Army positions and Kobayakawa's, way out of range of arquebuses and even too far for a shot to be heard, make this very unlikely. Kobayakawa eventually joined the battle around noon as a member of the Eastern Army. His forces charged Otani's position. Otani's forces had dry gunpowder, so they opened fire on the turncoats, making the charge of 16,000 men mostly ineffective. 15. However, Otani's troops were already engaging against forces under the command of Todo Takatora and Oda Yuraku when Kobayakawa charged. At this point, the buffer Otani established was outnumbered. Seeing this, Western Army daimyos Wakasaka Yasuharu, Agawa Suketada, Akaza Naoyasu and Kutsuki Motosuna switched sides, turning the tide of battle. Heavily outnumbered, Otani had no choice but to retreat. This left the Western Army's right flank wide open, so Fukushima and Kobayakawa began to roll it up. Thus Ishida's right flank was destroyed and his center was being pushed back, so he retreated. Ishida's only remaining forces were on Mount Nangu. However, these forces were there for a reason. Kikawa Hiroi was one of the commanders on the mountain. Kikawa's troops formed the front lines of the Mori army, which was commanded by his cousin Mori Hidemoto. Earlier, when Hidemoto decided to attack the Tokugawa forces, Hiroi refused to comply, stating he was busy eating and asked to be left alone. This in turn prevented the Chosokabe army, which deployed behind the Mori clan, from attacking. When Ishida arrived, Kikawa betrayed him as well. He kept the Mori army at bay, and since Ishida had no more support, he was defeated. The Western army disintegrated afterwards with the commanders scattering and fleeing. Some, like Yukita Hide, managed to escape, at least initially. Many others did not. Shima Sakin was shot and fatally wounded by a round from an arquebus and Otani Yoshitsugu committed suicide. Ishida, Yukinaga and Ike were some of those who were captured and a few, like Shimazu Yoshihiro, were able to return to their home provinces. Mori Terumoto and his forces had remained entrenched at Osaka Castle rather than join the battle, and later quietly surrendered to Tokugawa. Ishida himself was later executed. Both sides had forces that did not arrive at Sekigahara in time to participate due to other battles. Ieyasu's son Hidetada led another group through Nakasendo. However, Hidetada's forces were bogged down as he attempted to besiege Sanada Masayuki's Ueda castle against his father's direct orders. Even though the Tokugawa forces numbered some 38,000, an overwhelming advantage over Sanada's mere 2,000, they were still unable to capture the famous strategist's well-defended position. At the same time, 15,000 Toyotomi troops were being held up by 500 troops under Hosokawa Yusai at Tanabe Castle in present-day Meijuru, Kyoto Prefecture. 21. Some among the 15,000 troops respected Hosokawa so much they intentionally slowed their pace. Due to these incidents, a large number of troops from both sides failed to show up in time for the battle. If either of these armies participated in the conflict, it could have ended quite differently. The events leading up to the final battle of Sekigahara 1600. May 7, Ieyasu asks Uesugi Kagekatsu for explanations for his military mobilization. Kagekatsu refuses Ieyasu. June 8, Ieyasu calls his allies to punish the Uesugi. July 12, Ieyasu holds a meeting in Osaka to plan the punishment of the Uesugi, attended by Hosokawa Tadaoki, Date Masamune, Magami Yoshiaki, Satake Yoshinobu and Nanbu Tashinao. July 26, Ieyasu leaves Fushimi Castle after meeting with Torii Mototada. August 16, Mitsunari meets with Otani Yoshitsugu and convinces him to take sides against the Tokugawa. August 17, Ishida Mitsunari, Ankokuji Ike. Otani Yoshitsugu and Mashida Nagamori meet in Sawayama and agree to ask Mori Terumoto to become commander-in-chief of the alliance. Nagamori secretly sends Ieyasu news about the meeting. August 19, Siege of Tanabe. While Hosokawa Tadaoki was joining army to attack Uesugi, Mitsunari Western Army, Ikoma Chikamasa forces attack Tanabe Castle led by Onoki Shigekatsu against Hosokawa Fujitaka. August 22, Mori Terumoto arrives at Osaka Castle and takes command of the Western Alliance. August 23, Battle of Gifu Castle begins. Oda Hidenobu of the Western forces against Ikeda Terumasa, Ikeda Sen and Fukushima Masanori of the Eastern forces. August 27, Siege of Fushimi. Led by Mitsunari and Kobayakawa Hideaki. August 29, Ieyasu establishes his headquarters in Oyama, Shizuoka to discuss strategy with allies. August 30, Battle of Asai. Maeda Toshinaga for the Eastern Coalition, stems a force of Niwa Nagashige supported by Uesugi Kagekatsu. September 1, Siege of Shiroishi. Uesugi Kagekatsu loses Shiroishi Castle to Date Masamune's pro-Tokugawa troops. September 6, Fall of Tanabe Castle to the Western Army and Fujitaka entered Kamiyama Castle, the lord of which was Maeda Shigekatsu, Western General, in Tanba. September 7, Maeda Toshinaga, Tokugawa ally, attacks his brother, Toshimasa, and besieges Daishoji Castle. The commander of the garrison, Yamaguchi Munenaga, commits seppuku. September 8, Fall of Fushimi Castle, Torii Mototada and Matsudera Ayatada dies. September 10, Ieyasu returns to Edo Castle from Oyama. September 15, Mitsunari's Western Army arrives at Ogaki Castle. September 29, Nabeshima Naoshige and other Western Army generals besiege Matsuoka Castle. The Army of the East occupies the heights of Akasaka, near Ogaki Castle. September 29, Fall of Gifu Castle into the hands of the Eastern Coalition. Tokugawa Hidetada heads towards Nakasendo. September 30, Mori Hidemoto lays siege to Inosu Castle held by Tomita Nobutaka. October 1, Mitsunari returns to Sawayama Castle from Ogaki, asking Terumoto to move. Terumoto was at Osaka Castle defending Toyotomi Hideyori. October 7, Ieyasu leaves Edo at the head of 30,000 men towards Tokaido. October 9, Hidetada reaches Komoro, Nagano and against the orders of his father, diverts his forces towards Ueda. October 12, Ieyasu passes through Shimada in Suruga. Hidetada camps in Sumtani village to besiege Ueda Castle against Sanada Masayuki. October 13, Ieyasu passes through Nakaizumi in Totemi. Mori Hidemoto and Kikawa Hiroi enters Mino and sets up camp near Mount Nengu. Mori Hidekane, Tachibana Munashige and Tsukushi Hirakato besiege Atsu Castle, held for Ieyasu by Kyogoku Takatsugu. October 14, Ieyasu receives a secret messenger from Kobayakawa Hideaki, who offers him support. Naoi Kanetsugu leads the Uesugi forces against Magami Yoshiaki at the siege of Hasedo. October 16, Hidetada abandons the siege of Ueda Castle and heads to Mino. October 19, Ieyasu arrives at Gifu Castle in Mino. Kuroda Yoshitaka defeats Otomo Yoshimune and other Mitsunari allied generals at the Battle of Ishigakabara. October 20, Ieyasu moves to Akasaka. The two coalitions make contact at Kusagawa. Near Akasaka, the eastern force retreats to Sekigahara. The western coalition heads to Sekigahara from Ogaki Castle. October 21, Battle of Sekigahara. October, Siege of Yanagawa is the last battle of the Kyushu Sekigahara campaign. October 30, Date Masamune tries to conquer Fukushima Castle but retires. In May 1601, during the Battle of Matsukawa, Masamune is repelled by Honjo Shigenaga. November 5, Naoi Kanetsugu called a full withdrawal of all Uesugi forces, putting an end to Uesugi's campaigns in the north.
これは ビデオで終わりです。